The metal bucket slipped from Natalie Jordan's trembling fingers, industrial cleaner splashing across marble floors that cost more than her annual salary. Because standing before her in the private wing she'd been explicitly told was under renovation stood a man a creature with skin like moonlight and hair white as winter frost, hunched over another figure whose throat had been torn open, blood painting his elegant mouth crimson. Time crystallized into that single horrible moment. The vampire's head snapped toward her with predatory speed, eyes blazing an inhuman silver that seemed to pierce straight through her chest. The corpse at his feet wore the uniform of building security. The same man who'd waved at her cheerfully just 2 hours ago when her night shift began. Her mind couldn't process the wrongness of it, the impossible reality of fangs and death and monsters that shouldn't exist outside of movies and books she'd hidden under her pillow as a teenager. I'm sorry, I didn't. The words tumbled out in a terrified whisper as Natalie stumbled backward, her spine hitting the ornate wall. Her legs had turned to water. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but her body refused to cooperate, frozen under the weight of that inhuman gaze. The vampire rose to his full height with fluid grace that defied natural movement. He was tall, imposing, dressed in clothing that looked centuries out of place, a fitted black shirt that might have been silk, tailored trousers, boots that belonged in a museum. Blood dripped from his chin, a grotesque contrast to the otherworldly beauty of his features. Sharp cheekbones, a jaw that could have been carved from marble, and those eyes that held the weight of ages. You shouldn't have seen this. His voice was deep, accented with something ancient that she couldn't place. British perhaps, but older, richer, like whiskey aged in forgotten cellars. What is your name, girl? And Natalie. Why was she answering? Why wasn't she screaming? But the scream sat trapped in her throat, too large to emerge. Please, I won't tell anyone. I swear I'll forget everything. I'll quit tonight. You'll do no such thing. He moved then, crossing the distance between them faster than her eyes could track. One moment he stood 20 feet away, the next his hand rested against the wall beside her head, caging her in. The scent of copper and something darker, something that made her hindbrain recognize predator, flooded her senses. Do you know who I am? Natalie shook her head, tears burning her eyes. She'd taken this job at Ravencrest Tower 3 months ago, grateful for the decent pay and night shifts that let her attend online classes during the day. The building was one of those mysterious corporate headquarters that seemed to have money but no clear purpose, expensive art on the walls, private floors that required special key cards, employees who dressed like they were attending the opera. She'd never questioned it too closely, just cleaned the offices and bathrooms and tried to avoid the strange pale executives who sometimes worked through the night. My name is Theron Harrowick. He studied her face with unnerving intensity, his head tilting slightly. I am the Vampire King of the Eastern Territories, and you, little cleaner, have just witnessed something that violates our most sacred law. No human may know of our existence and live to speak of it. The words penetrated the fog of her terror. You're going to kill me. That would be the traditional response. His free hand rose and she flinched, but he merely wiped the blood from his mouth with his thumb, movements almost absent-minded. However, I find myself in an unusual position. This man, he gestured toward the corpse without looking away from her, was not authorized prey. He was a traitor, feeding information about my court to the Western clans. I had to eliminate him quietly here in neutral territory where my actions won't spark war. But you've complicated matters considerably. I don't understand. Natalie's voice cracked. Please, I have student loans. I have a mother who depends on me. I can't die? Something that might have been sympathy flickered across his features. I am aware that humans value their brief existences rather intensely. Which is why I'm going to offer you a choice that goes against everything my kind believes in. He stepped back slightly, giving her room to breathe, though she noticed he positioned himself between her and the only exit. The silver of his eyes had faded to something closer to gray, more human, though no less compelling. You will come with me, Theron said, his tone brooking no argument. To my territory, my home. You will remain there under my protection and supervision. You will not be harmed, but neither will you be free to leave or contact the outside world. In exchange, you keep your life. You're kidnapping me. The absurdity of discussing terms with a murderous vampire king struck her with hysterical force. That's not a choice, that's a prison sentence. The alternative is death. He stated it simply, without malice or pleasure. I take no joy in killing unnecessarily, but I cannot risk exposure. My people have survived millennia by maintaining absolute secrecy. If you refuse my offer, I will make your end swift and painless. You have my word as a king. Natalie's mind raced, trying to find some escape route, some logical argument that would convince a creature of legend to spare her. But the corpse on the floor served as brutal evidence that logic had abandoned this situation the moment she'd opened that door. "If I go with you," she said slowly, hating how her voice shook, "what happens to my life? My mother thinks I'm at work. My professors expect me in class online tomorrow. People will notice I'm gone. I will have it handled." Theron's expression remained impassive. "Your mother will receive notice that you've taken a sudden job opportunity abroad. Your accounts will show appropriate activity. No one will look for you because no one will realize you're missing. I have considerable resources, Miss Jordan." The use of her last name sent a chill down her spine. How did he already know? But then, if he was truly a king of vampires with resources enough to make people disappear, learning her full name would be trivial. "How long?" she whispered. "How long would I have to stay?" His pause lasted just a fraction too long. "I don't know. Until I can be certain you pose no threat. Until I trust that you won't expose us the moment you're released. Months, perhaps. Years, years." The word came out as a strangled cry. "You're talking about stealing my entire life. I'm talking about preserving it." His voice hardened. "Many of my court would argue I'm being dangerously sentimental even considering this option. The law is clear death for any human who learns our secret. I am offering you mercy in the only form I can provide. Take it or refuse it, but decide now. I have very little time before this body is discovered." Natalie looked at the dead guard again, at the impossible amount of blood, at the torn throat. Her stomach lurched. This was real. This was actually happening. Vampires existed, and she'd walked into something far beyond her comprehension, and now her choices had narrowed to imprisonment or death. "I want to live," she breathed. Something in Theron's expression shifted, a tension leaving his shoulders that she hadn't noticed he'd been holding. "Then you'll come with me willingly? Do I have a choice?" "No," he admitted. "But I'd prefer not to carry you unconscious through the building. It raises questions." The laugh that escaped her was broken, edged with hysteria. "Wouldn't want to raise questions while kidnapping someone? Your spirit is noted." The faintest hint of something that might have been humor touched his voice. "It will serve you well in the coming days. Now, we need to leave. My people are already handling the security footage and creating the necessary cover story. You'll walk out with me as though nothing is amiss. Can you manage that?" Natalie nodded numbly. What else could she do? She was 23 years old, working 2 jobs while finishing her degree in art history, and her biggest concern this morning had been whether she'd passed her quiz on Renaissance sculpture. Now she was being abducted by the Vampire King because she'd witnessed a murder that shouldn't exist. Theron held out his hand, palm up, in a gesture that would have been courtly in another context. "Come, before others arrive." She stared at his hand for a long moment, pale, elegant, stained with blood at the edges, then placed her shaking fingers in his. His skin was cool but not cold, his grip firm without being painful. He pulled her gently away from the wall, keeping her hand clasped in his as he led her toward the door. "Don't look at the body," he instructed quietly. "Keep your eyes forward. Can you do that?" "Yes." It came out steadier than she expected. Shock was setting in, wrapping her in cotton wool, making everything feel distant and unreal. They walked through corridors she'd cleaned 100 times, past offices where she'd emptied trash and vacuumed carpets, heading toward the private elevator she'd never been cleared to use. Theron moved with absolute confidence, his posture regal despite the blood on his clothing. He didn't release her hand. The elevator doors opened at his approach, no keycard needed. They stepped inside together, and only when the doors closed and they began descending did Natalie realize she was trembling violently. "Breathe," Theron said, his thumb moving in what might have been meant as a soothing circle against her knuckles. "You're in shock, that's normal. When we reach my residence, you'll be given food, water, a place to rest. I won't harm you tonight, but you might later." The question escaped before she could stop it. He looked down at her, and in the elevator's harsh lighting, she could see his features more clearly. Beautiful in a way that hurt to look at directly, as though nature had decided to create something beyond human comprehension. Old eyes in a young face, ancient and weary. "I have lived for over 1,000 years, Natalie Jordan," he said quietly. "In that time I've learned that absolute certainty is a fool's luxury. I cannot promise you what the future holds. But I can promise you this: as long as you remain under my protection, within my territory, you will be safe. That is my word as king, and I do not give it lightly." The elevator reached the underground parking level. When the doors opened, 3 other figures waited. All shared Theron's distinctive coloring: white hair, pale skin, that otherworldly beauty. Vampires. They were all vampires. One was a woman in a dark suit, her white hair pulled back in a severe knot. The 2 men flanking her wore similar formal attire, their expressions cold and assessing as they took in Natalie. "Your Majesty," the woman said, bowing her head respectfully. Everything is prepared. The tower's records have been cleansed. Her disappearance is accounted for. Excellent work, Seraphine. Theron gestured toward a black car with tinted windows that sat idling nearby. We leave immediately. Have the cleanup crew handle the body. Make it look like he fled the city. I want the Western clans to waste resources hunting their own traitor. As you command. Seraphine's gaze flickered to Natalie, and something cold moved through her expression. Disapproval, perhaps. Or calculation. The human comes with us? She is under my personal protection. Theron's voice carried weight, a command wrapped in silk. Spread the word through court. Any who touch her answer to me directly. The three vampires bowed in unison, and Natalie felt their attention on her like physical weight. She was being studied, assessed, judged, found lacking, probably. She was just a human, just a cleaner, stumbling into a world that operated by rules she couldn't begin to understand. Theron guided her toward the car, opening the back door himself. Inside, we have a drive ahead of us. She climbed in, the leather seats soft enough to sink into. He settled beside her, his presence overwhelming in the confined space. The door closed with an expensive sound, sealing them in together. Where are we going? Natalie asked as the car pulled smoothly into motion. My estate. It's outside the city, secluded. You'll be comfortable there. He studied her profile. Are you cold? You're still shaking. I'm terrified, she said bluntly. I just watched you kill someone and now I'm being taken to a vampire king's house. Cold doesn't really factor into it. Fair enough. He shrugged out of his jacket, draping it over her shoulders despite her half-hearted protest. It smelled like expensive cologne and something darker, more primal. For what it's worth, I regret the necessity of this situation, but you're doing it anyway. Yes. No apology in his tone. I am responsible for thousands of lives, Natalie. My people depend on secrecy for survival. One human life weighed against the safety of entire vampire territories? The mathematics are simple, even if the morality is not. She pulled his jacket tighter around herself, hating that she found some comfort in its warmth. Do you kill humans often? No. He turned to look out the window as the car emerged from underground parking into the night. I feed as all my kind must, but I don't kill. We have arrangements with human donors who volunteer in exchange for compensation. They're treated well, paid generously, and their memories are carefully managed. It's a system that served us for centuries. Memories managed, Natalie repeated. You mean erased, altered. Yes, we have abilities that allow such things. But it's an imperfect art and it doesn't work on everyone. Some humans have natural resistance, others simply know too much for safe erasure. His gaze returned to her. Killing you would have been simpler than taking you. Cleaner. But I find myself reluctant. Why? She needed to understand, even if the answer wouldn't change anything. Why not just make me forget, or kill me and avoid the complication? Theron was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. I saw your face when you realized what I was. Terror, yes, but also wonder. Curiosity. You looked at me like I was something impossible rather than something monstrous. It's been a very long time since a human looked at me that way. I still think you're a monster, Natalie said quietly. You killed that man. I executed a traitor who would have brought war to my doorstep. His voice remained level. I am a king before I am anything else. My hands have been stained with blood for centuries. But I am not needlessly cruel and I do not enjoy causing suffering. Remember that in the days ahead. The car wound through city streets, heading toward the outskirts where buildings gave way to trees and open space. Natalie watched the lights fade behind them, each mile taking her further from everything she knew. Her phone sat in her locker at work, her car in the employee lot. She'd told her mother she'd call tomorrow evening. Would anyone realize something was wrong before Theron's people implemented whatever cover story they'd concocted? My mother, she said suddenly. She has a heart condition. She needs her medications and I help her remember to take them. If she thinks I've just left her, she'll receive care. Theron cut her off firmly. I meant what I said about handling your affairs. Part of ensuring your cooperation is guaranteeing that your life continues smoothly in your absence. Your mother will receive a message from you explaining your sudden opportunity. A home care nurse will check on her regularly, paid through an anonymous scholarship fund. She won't suffer because of this. Relief warred with guilt in Natalie's chest. Thank you. Don't thank me for the consequences of my own actions. He sounded almost bitter. I'm solving problems I created. They drove in silence after that, the city falling completely away until only dark roads and darker forests surrounded them. Eventually the car turned onto a private drive, marked only by stone pillars. They traveled for another 10 minutes through manicured grounds before a structure emerged from the trees. Calling it a house felt insufficient. The estate was a mansion that belonged in European countryside, all Gothic architecture and elegant stonework, with towers that reached toward the night sky. Lights glowed in some windows, giving it an almost welcoming appearance despite its imposing size. "Welcome to Harrowick Manor," Theron said as the car stopped before grand entrance doors. "Your home for the foreseeable future." The doors opened and more vampires appeared. Natalie counted at least 6, all with that same distinctive coloring, all moving with that same predatory grace. Staff, she realized. Servants attending their king. They bowed as Theron emerged from the car, their eyes tracking to her with varying expressions of surprise and interest. "This is Natalie Jordan," Theron announced, his hand at the small of her back, guiding her up the steps. "She is my guest and under my direct protection. Provide her with anything she requires." "The East Wing suite has been prepared?" "Yes, Your Majesty." A male vampire with white hair tied back in a low tail stepped forward. "All is ready as you requested." "Good. Natalie, this is Victor. He manages the household. If you need anything and cannot find me, go to him." Theron paused in the grand foyer, lit by a chandelier that probably cost more than Natalie's childhood home. "I know you're exhausted and overwhelmed. Victor will show you to your rooms. There's food waiting and clothes have been provided. Rest tonight. Tomorrow we'll discuss the terms of your stay in greater detail." "Terms?" She couldn't help the bitter laugh. "I'm a prisoner. What terms are there to discuss? You're under protection, not imprisonment," Theron corrected, though his expression acknowledged the distinction was slim. "There's a difference, and you'll learn it. For now, sleep. Things will seem less dire after rest." He was dismissing her. The Vampire King was actually just sending her off with a servant like she was a guest at a hotel rather than a captive in a nightmare. The absurdity of it struck her again, that cotton wool feeling of unreality wrapping tighter. Victor approached with a slight bow. "If you'll follow me, Miss Jordan." Natalie looked back at Theron, at the blood that still stained his shirt, at the ancient eyes that held secrets she couldn't begin to fathom. "Why do I feel like my life just ended? Because in many ways it has," he said quietly. "And I'm truly sorry for that. But perhaps in time you'll find that new lives can be built from the ashes of old ones. I've had to learn that lesson many times over the centuries." Then he turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing on marble floors, leaving her standing in a vampire lord's mansion with no way home and no idea what came next. Victor cleared his throat gently. "Miss Jordan, your rooms?" She followed because what else could she do? Fight? Run? She'd seen how fast Theron moved. She wouldn't make it to the door. Besides, part of her, the part still numb with shock, was curious. What did a Vampire King's guest suite look like? What kind of cage had she just agreed to occupy? The East Wing was accessed through corridors lined with artwork that belonged in museums. Original paintings she recognized with her art history student's eye, some of them centuries old. Victor noticed her staring. "His Majesty is an avid collector," he explained, his accent similar to Theron's but less pronounced. "He's had many years to acquire pieces he admires." "How long have you served him?" The question came out automatically, her mind grasping for anything normal to focus on. 347 years. Victor smiled at her expression. "I was turned in the 1600s. Theron found me dying of plague and offered me a choice. I've never regretted accepting." "He turns humans into vampires?" "On rare occasions when he finds someone worthy." They stopped before ornate double doors, but it's not a decision made lightly. The process is intense, and the existence afterward is not for everyone. Here we are. He opened the doors to reveal a suite that made Natalie's entire apartment look like a closet. A sitting room with elegant furniture and a fireplace. Visible bedroom beyond with a bed large enough for 4 people, what looked like a full bathroom through another door. More artwork on the walls, a bookshelf filled with leather-bound volumes, windows that showed the dark grounds outside. "There's food on the table." Victor gestured to a spread that could have fed a family. "Fresh clothes in the wardrobe, toiletries in the bathroom. The windows don't open for your safety, but you're free to move about the suite as you please. Tomorrow someone will come to explain the estate rules and your boundaries." "Boundaries," Natalie repeated numbly. "Right. Because I'm a prisoner." "You're protected," Victor corrected, his tone surprisingly gentle. "There are vampires who would see your presence here as an insult or a threat. His Majesty is taking a considerable risk by keeping you alive. The least you can do is afford him the courtesy of understanding that." He left before she could respond, the doors closing with a soft click. Alone finally, Natalie stood in the center of the opulent prison and felt the full weight of what had happened crash over her. Her legs gave out and she sank to the floor, Theron's jacket still around her shoulders, and began to cry. She cried for her normal life, for her mother who would worry, for her dreams of graduating and working in a museum. She cried for the security guard whose name she'd never learned, dead because he'd chosen the wrong side in a war she didn't understand. and she cried for herself, for the girl who just wanted to clean offices and pay her bills and maybe find something resembling happiness. Eventually the tears dried up, leaving her hollow and exhausted. She forced herself to stand, to examine the food, all of it fresh and appealing despite her lack of appetite. She found the bathroom and nearly wept again at the luxury of it. A shower with multiple heads, marble counters, a tub deep enough to swim in. Someone had left expensive toiletries and fluffy towels. She showered because she felt dirty, because the hot water helped her think. When she emerged, she found nightclothes laid out on the bed, silk pajamas that fit perfectly. Of course they did. Theron had said he had resources. Apparently those resources included knowing her exact size. The bed was impossibly soft. She should have laid awake all night, paranoid and terrified. Instead, exhaustion claimed her within minutes, dragging her down into dreamless sleep that offered temporary escape from her new reality. When Natalie woke, sunlight streamed through the windows, painting the elegant room in shades of gold. For a moment, she thought it had all been a nightmare. Then she recognized the unfamiliar ceiling, the too soft bed, and reality came crashing back. She sat up slowly, her body aching from tension she'd carried even in sleep. Someone had been in the room while she slept. Fresh food sat on the table, replacing last night's untouched spread. The thought of vampires entering while she was unconscious made her skin crawl. A knock at the door made her jump. "Miss Jordan?" A female voice, accented and formal. "May I enter, I guess?" What would happen if she said no? Would they come in anyway? The door opened to reveal a female vampire with white hair twisted in an intricate braid, wearing what looked like a professional business suit. She was stunning in that same uncanny way all the vampires seemed to be, beautiful beyond normal human genetics. "I am Seraphine," she introduced herself with a slight nod. "We met briefly last night. I serve as His Majesty's chief advisor and administrator. I'm here to explain how things work at Harrowick Manor." Natalie pulled the blanket tighter around herself, feeling vulnerable in her borrowed pajamas. "Am I allowed to get dressed first?" "Of course. I'll wait." Seraphine moved to the sitting room, settling into a chair with perfect posture. Natalie fled to the wardrobe, finding it stocked with clothes in her size: jeans, shirts, dresses, even undergarments. All of it expensive, all of it tasteful. She grabbed jeans and a sweater, dressing quickly in the bathroom. When she emerged, Seraphine was examining her manicured nails with an expression of bored patience. "Shall we begin?" Seraphine gestured to the opposite chair. "Please sit, we have much to cover." Natalie sat, her hands twisting together in her lap. "Am I really supposed to pretend this is normal? That I'm just a guest here?" "You're supposed to survive," Seraphine said bluntly, "which means understanding your situation and adapting to it. His Majesty has done something unprecedented by allowing you to live. Many in the court view this as weakness. If you give them reason to doubt his judgment, you'll be eliminated regardless of his protection. So I'm not safe even here? You're safer than you would be anywhere else in our world, but safety is relative when you're human among vampires." Seraphine's gaze was sharp, assessing. "Now the rules. You are permitted to move freely within the manor and the immediate grounds during daylight hours. After sunset you must remain in the main house unless accompanied by His Majesty or myself. You will not attempt to contact the outside world or escape. The estate is monitored and you will be caught." "What happens if I try?" Natalie couldn't help asking. "Consequences." Seraphine didn't elaborate. "You'll take meals in your suite or the main dining hall. You have access to the library, the gardens, the music room. His Majesty insists you be treated as a guest, so you'll want for nothing material." "Questions so far? How long?" The same question she'd asked Theron. "How long do I have to stay here until His Majesty decides otherwise?" Seraphine's expression softened slightly, the first hint of something resembling sympathy. "I understand this is difficult for you, but you must comprehend what you represent. You're a human who knows our secret, living among us. It's unheard of. His Majesty is attempting something that goes against a millennium of law and tradition. If you wish to survive, you'll need to prove you're worth the risk he's taking." "I didn't ask for any of this." The words burst out, anger finally cutting through the fear. "I was just doing my job. I opened the wrong door at the wrong time and now my entire life is gone." "Yes," Seraphine agreed simply. "It's unfair, it's tragic, and it changes nothing. You can spend your time here raging against injustice, or you can adapt and find some measure of peace. I recommend the latter." She stood, smoothing her skirt. "His Majesty requests your presence in the library at midday. Victor will come to escort you. I suggest you eat something first. You look half dead, and that's never a good condition to be in when surrounded by vampires." After Seraphine left, Natalie did eat, forcing down fruit and bread that tasted like dust in her mouth. Anger and fear warred in her chest, neither quite winning. She was trapped, completely at the mercy of creatures that shouldn't exist. And yet she was alive. Theron could have killed her. By his own admission, it would have been easier. Instead, he'd brought her here, given her luxury and safety, and asked only that she remain. Why? The question haunted her. What did a vampire king gain from keeping one frightened human girl alive? At midday exactly, Victor appeared to escort her through the manor. In daylight, the building was even more impressive, all vaulted ceilings and Gothic architecture, mixing medieval sensibilities with modern comfort. They passed other vampires occasionally, all of whom stopped to stare at her with expressions ranging from curiosity to open hostility. "Don't make eye contact," Victor advised quietly. "Many here view you as an abomination. His Majesty's word protects you, but it's wise not to provoke unnecessarily." The library was enormous, 2 stories of floor-to-ceiling bookshelves surrounding a space that could have held 100 people. Leather furniture clustered near a massive fireplace, and standing by the windows, silhouetted against the light, was Theron. He turned as they entered, and Natalie's breath caught. In daylight filtered through heavy curtains, she noticed he looked even more otherworldly. The white hair that fell past his shoulders seemed to glow, his pale skin luminescent. He wore modern clothing, dark pants and a white shirt, but carried himself with the bearing of ancient royalty. "Thank you, Victor." He dismissed the other vampire with a gesture. "Natalie, did you sleep?" "Eventually." She stayed near the door, maintaining distance. "Your advisor explained the rules of my captivity." "Your protection," he corrected, moving closer. "Seraphine can be harsh, but she's not wrong. You're safer here than anywhere else." "Safe from what? Other vampires? The same creatures you rule?" Anger bled into her voice. "Maybe I'd be safer in my own apartment, living my own life. You'd be dead within a week." He said it matter-of-factly. "The Western clans have spies everywhere. Once they realize someone witnessed the traitor's death, they'd hunt you to learn what you knew. And they wouldn't be as merciful as I'm being." "Merciful," Natalie repeated incredulously. "You kidnapped me. I saved your life." The first flash of real emotion broke through his composure. "Do you think I wanted this complication? I have territories to manage, alliances to maintain, wars to prevent. Keeping a human alive goes against every law my people hold sacred." "But I couldn't," he stopped, running a hand through his white hair in a gesture that was startlingly human. "I looked at you and couldn't bring myself to kill you. That's the truth of it. Inconvenient and possibly foolish, but truth nonetheless." They stared at each other across the library, tension crackling in the air between them. Natalie's heart hammered against her ribs, fight or flight instincts screaming at her even as logic reminded her there was nowhere to run. "Why?" she asked again, more quietly this time. "Why couldn't you kill me?" Theron turned back to the windows, his profile sharp against the filtered light. "I've existed for over 1,000 years. I've killed, conquered, ruled. I've watched empires rise and fall, seen humanity evolve from feudal societies to digital age. And somewhere in all those centuries I grew. Tired of violence, of necessary evils, of the endless political machinations that define immortal existence." He glanced back at her, something vulnerable flickering across his face. "Then you stumbled into that room, and instead of seeing a problem to eliminate, I saw a life. A real, precious, finite life that would end if I acted. And I found I couldn't do it. Perhaps that makes me weak. Perhaps it will cost me my throne. But I stand by the choice." Natalie felt something shift in her chest, a tiny crack in the wall of fear and anger. This ancient vampire king looked almost lost in that moment, burdened by decisions she couldn't begin to understand. "I don't want to be here," she said, but with less venom than before. "I want my life back. I know." He moved to the shelves, pulling down a leather-bound volume. "I can't give you that, but perhaps I can give you something else. Access to knowledge few humans ever see. I have texts here that date back millennia, history, art, philosophy, all of it preserved and protected. You're an art history student, yes? Victor mentioned you were examining the paintings in the corridors. You were spying on me. I was learning about you." He held out the book. "This is a first-hand account of the construction of Chartres Cathedral, written by the master mason himself. I knew him. We were friends before age took him and left me behind." Despite herself, Natalie stepped closer, drawn by curiosity that had always been her weakness. She took the book with trembling hands, opening it to find pages covered in medieval French script, illuminated with gold leaf that still shone after centuries. "This should be in a museum," she breathed. "It would crumble to dust if exposed to modern museum conditions. Here, in controlled environment, it endures." Theron watched her examine the pages with something like satisfaction. "I have hundreds of such volumes. Art, architecture, music, literature, I've collected it all. If you must remain here, at least let your mind roam free. Study, learn, ask questions. I can offer you knowledge that universities would kill to possess." It was a peace offering, she realized, his way of making captivity bearable. And damn her, but it was working. Her fingers traced the illuminated letters reverently, her scholar's heart singing with joy even as her rational mind screamed that she shouldn't be seduced by pretty books. "If I stay," she said slowly, not looking up from the page. "If I accept this situation, you have to promise me something. Name it, no lies, no games. If I ask you a question, you answer truthfully. I can't live in the dark, not understanding what's happening around me or why." She finally met his eyes. "I need honesty even when it's terrible. Can you give me that?" Theron considered for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Yes, I'll answer your questions truthfully, within the bounds of what I can safely share. Some things involve court politics or magical secrets that could endanger you to know, but where I can speak freely, I will. You have my word, okay?" She clutched the book to her chest like a shield. "Then I'll try. I'll try to adapt, to learn your world. But I won't pretend I'm not angry, and I won't pretend this is okay. I would never ask you to." Something like respect entered his expression. Most humans would have broken by now, honestly. "You're stronger than you appear, Natalie Jordan. I really hate that you keep using my full name. It's a formality my era ingrained in me. Would you prefer I simply call you Natalie?" "I'd prefer you call me from my own apartment telling me this was all a nightmare," she said dryly. "But Natalie is fine." The smallest smile tugged at his mouth, the first she'd seen from him. It transformed his face, making him look younger, less burdened. "Come, let me show you the rest of the library. If you're to be trapped here, you might as well know where all the treasures are hidden." He spent the next 2 hours giving her a tour of the collection, and despite everything, Natalie found herself fascinated. Books that predated the printing press, original manuscripts from authors long dead, artwork sketched by masters whose names still echoed through history. Theron had a story for many of them, personal anecdotes that brought history alive in ways no textbook ever could. "You knew Da Vinci?" She stared at the sketch definitively in the master's hand. "Briefly, brilliant mind, terrible with money. He owed me a debt, so he sketched that for me one evening while we drank wine and argued about the nature of flight." Theron's expression turned nostalgic. He was convinced humans would one day soar like birds. "I thought he was mad. Shows what I know. This is surreal." Natalie sank into one of the leather chairs, the weight of it all pressing down on her. "I'm sitting in a vampire's library, looking at original Da Vinci sketches, discussing aviation history. Yesterday I was worried about passing my midterms. Yesterday you were human living in ignorance of the true world." He settled into the chair opposite her, movements fluid and graceful. "Today you're human living with full knowledge. It's a profound shift, and I don't envy you the adjustment. Do you miss it?" The question surprised her as much as him. "Being human?" Theron was quiet for a long time, his gaze distant. "I barely remember it. I was turned in the year 1043 during a battle that history has long forgotten. I was a lord's son, trained in warfare, arrogant and foolish. I should have died on that field. Instead, a vampire found me bleeding out and offered me eternity. I took it without understanding what I was accepting. Do you regret it?" "Some days." His honesty startled her. "Immortality sounds appealing until you've watched everyone you love age and die. Until you've seen the same patterns repeat century after century, until you realize that humanity never truly learns from its mistakes. Other days, I'm grateful. I've seen wonders beyond measure. I've shaped history in small ways. I've built something here, a court that maintains peace and protects both vampire and human interests. That matters. What do vampires want?" Natalie leaned forward, seized by curiosity stronger than fear. "I mean beyond blood and secrecy. What do you actually want?" "The same things humans want: power, security, love, meaning. We're not so different despite the obvious distinctions." He tilted his head, studying her. "We feel, we dream, we fear. We simply have more time to pursue those desires and nurse those fears. Do you love?" The question escaped before she could stop it. "Can you?" "Yes." Something painful crossed his face. "Though it's complicated by immortality. Loving another vampire means navigating eternity together, with all the conflict that entails. Loving a human means knowing they'll age and die while you remain unchanged. Both paths lead to heartbreak. Have you loved? In your 1,000 years?" "Twice." He didn't elaborate, and she didn't push. The grief in his voice was enough. They sat in silence for a while, the library quiet except for the crackle of fire in the hearth. Natalie felt her perspective shifting, the vampire king becoming more complex and less monstrous with each conversation. He'd still kidnapped her. He'd still killed that guard. But he was also ancient and lonely and burdened by centuries of choices. "I should let you rest," Theron said, eventually rising with that inhuman grace. "This is a lot to process. Tomorrow, if you're willing, I'd like to show you more of the estate. The gardens are particularly beautiful in morning light." "Okay." She stood as well, still clutching the medieval manuscript. "Can I keep this to read? You can access anything in this library. All of it is yours to explore." He walked her to the door, where Victor waited to escort her back. "Natalie, thank you for trying. I know that's more than I have any right to ask." She didn't respond, just followed Victor back through the corridors to her gilded cage. But later, curled up in the too-soft bed with the ancient book in her hands, she found herself thinking about silver eyes and old grief and a vampire who'd chosen mercy when cruelty would have been easier. Maybe, just maybe, she could survive this. And maybe survival didn't have to mean just enduring. Maybe it could mean learning, growing, understanding a world she'd never known existed. The thought both terrified and excited her as sleep claimed her once more. The days began to blur together in a strange rhythm that felt nothing like her old life but gradually became familiar. Natalie woke with the sun, ate meals provided by silent vampire staff, and spent her mornings in the library or gardens. Theron joined her for a few hours each day, sometimes discussing the books she was reading, other times simply sitting in companionable silence while they both pursued separate studies. He was, she discovered, nothing like she'd expected a vampire king to be. Yes, he was commanding and ancient and occasionally terrifying when his power flared in moments of anger or stress. But he was also surprisingly patient, quick to laugh at her modern references he didn't understand, endlessly knowledgeable about subjects ranging from medieval poetry to quantum physics he'd taught himself in recent decades. "You have to understand," he explained one afternoon as they walked through gardens blooming with night flowers. "When you have eternity, you fill it however you can. I've been a warrior, a scholar, a patron of the arts, even a scientist for a time. Learning keeps me sane. What keeps you sane now?" Natalie asked, genuinely curious. They'd fallen into this pattern of honest questions, her taking him up on his promise to answer truthfully. Theron considered, his white hair catching the fading light. "Responsibility, mostly. I have people depending on me. The Eastern Territories span thousands of miles and include dozens of vampire clans. Keeping peace, maintaining secrecy, ensuring everyone follows our laws, it's consuming work. But it matters. Do you have friends?" The question made him pause mid-step. "I mean real friends, not just subjects or advisors." "Not really," he admitted after a moment. "It's lonely at the top, as the saying goes. Most vampires fear me too much to be genuine. And friendships require a certain equality that's difficult when you're a king." "That sounds awful." "It is what it is." He resumed walking, hands clasped behind his back in a gesture she'd learned meant he was thinking. "I accepted this role knowing the costs. Someone has to lead. Someone has to make the difficult decisions and bear the weight of them. I've been doing it so long I've forgotten what it's like to simply exist without the burden." Natalie felt a pang of sympathy that surprised her. Here was this powerful, immortal creature and he was fundamentally alone, trapped by his own position as surely as she was trapped by her knowledge. "Well," she said impulsively, "maybe we can be friends. I mean, I'm stuck here anyway, and you're the only person who talks to me like I'm human rather than an inconvenient problem. Might as well be friendly about it." He stopped again, turning to face her with an expression of such open surprise that she nearly laughed. "You want to be friends with the vampire who kidnapped you?" "I want to not be completely miserable for however long I'm here," she corrected. "And you're not terrible company when you're not being all brooding and kingly. So yeah, friends. Or at least friendly. Is that allowed in vampire politics?" "There's no law against it," Theron said slowly, something warming in his silver eyes. "I'd like that. It's been a very long time since anyone offered me friendship freely. Don't get too excited. I'm still mad about the kidnapping thing. But being angry every second is exhausting." She shrugged, trying to seem casual even as something significant shifted between them. "Besides, I'm going to need someone to explain all these vampire politics that keep making everyone glare at me in the hallways." "Ah yes, the glaring," he grimaced. "I'm afraid you've become something of a controversial topic in court. Half my advisors think I'm being dangerously sentimental. The other half think I'm playing some elaborate political game they haven't figured out yet. What are you actually doing?" She'd wondered this often, trying to understand his true motivations. Honestly, following instinct for the first time in centuries. He looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I told you that night I looked at you and couldn't kill you. Everything since has been me trying to figure out what that means and how to keep you alive without destabilizing everything I've built." "No pressure then," she said lightly. But her heart was racing. As weeks passed, the friendship they'd claimed became real. Theron sought her out not just for scheduled meetings but spontaneously, appearing in the library to share something interesting he'd discovered, or inviting her to walk the grounds at dusk when the gardens transformed under moonlight. She learned to read his moods, to know when he needed comfortable silence versus distraction from whatever political crisis currently plagued him. He was teaching her about his world in pieces, the hierarchy of vampire courts, the territories and their histories, the laws that governed their kind. Some of it was fascinating, like learning that vampires had influenced human history far more than anyone realized, guiding certain technological advances and preventing certain wars. Other parts were terrifying, like the casual way he discussed executions and blood rites, and the treatment of humans who served vampire households. Not all courts are like mine, he assured her when she expressed horror at some particularly brutal custom. I've worked hard to ensure the Eastern Territories treat humans ethically, but I can't control what happens in other regions. Some vampire lords still view humans as nothing more than food. How do you feed? She'd been afraid to ask, but curiosity finally won. You said you have donors? Yes. Humans who volunteer in exchange for payment and benefits. They come to us willingly, feed us safely, and leave unharmed beyond some temporary weakness. Their memories are adjusted so they don't remember specifics, and they're monitored to ensure no lasting damage. He met her eyes seriously. I haven't killed to feed in over 200 years, Natalie. Not since I had the power to establish a better system. But you killed that guard. That was execution, not feeding. There's a distinction. His expression hardened. He betrayed his people and would have caused war. His death was justice, not hunger. She wasn't sure she agreed, but she was beginning to understand his world operated by different rules. Not human morality, but something older, harsher, built on survival and power dynamics she was only starting to grasp. One evening, about 6 weeks into her captivity, Natalie was curled up in the library reading a first edition of Dracula. The irony wasn't lost on her when Seraphine swept in looking agitated. Your Majesty, we have a situation. She stopped short, seeing Natalie. Privately, if possible, Natalie is trustworthy. Theron closed his own book, tension suddenly radiating from him. What's happened? Seraphine's jaw tightened, but she continued. The Western clans are demanding an audience. They know about the human. Somehow, word has spread that you're keeping a mortal alive who witnessed vampire business. They're calling it a breach of our most fundamental law. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Theron rose slowly, power crackling around him like static electricity. How did they learn? We're investigating, but right now we need to address their demand. They want to convene a full court council to discuss your transgression. Seraphine's gaze flicked to Natalie apologetically. They want her executed to preserve the law. Fear spiked through Natalie's chest, sharp and immediate. You said I was safe here. You are. Theron's voice was steel. I am the vampire king of the Eastern Territories. No one touches you without going through me first. Seraphine, arrange the council. Let them come. We'll settle this matter definitively. Your Majesty, they may challenge your authority. If you appear weakened by sentiment, then they'll learn exactly how weak I'm not. His eyes flashed silver. Set it for 3 nights from now. That gives us time to prepare. And Seraphine, make it clear that anyone who threatens Natalie answers to me personally. Spread that message through every clan. I want no misunderstandings. After Seraphine left, Natalie found her hands were shaking. They're going to try to kill me. They're going to try, Theron agreed, moving to crouch before her chair so they were eye level. And they will fail. I won't let anything happen to you, Natalie. That's a promise. You can't promise that. You said yourself there are laws. Laws I have the authority to challenge and change. I am king. That means something. His hands covered hers, cool and steady. I need you to trust me. Can you do that? She looked into his eyes, those ancient silver eyes that had seen empires fall, and found herself nodding. I trust you. I don't know why, but do. Because you know I would never hurt you intentionally. His thumbs traced circles on her knuckles, the gesture tender. You've become important to me, Natalie. More important than is probably wise. But I'm old enough to recognize when something matters, and you matter. Whatever happens in 3 nights, I will keep you safe. The conviction in his voice made her believe him, but it also made her realize something that sent heat flooding through her chest. He cared. The Vampire King genuinely cared about her, possibly more than either of them had acknowledged until now. Theron, she whispered, what are we doing? What is this between us? He was silent for a long moment, his gaze searching her face. I don't know. I've been trying to define it and failing. You're not just a human I'm protecting. You're not just a friend. He trailed off, seemingly at a loss for words. Important, she finished for him, using his own word. You're important to me too, which is insane because you kidnapped me and turned my life upside down. But somehow when I think about leaving here, about going back to my old life, I feel sad, like I'd be losing something valuable. I won't make you leave. The words were fierce, possessive. Even after this council matter is settled, Even if it becomes safe for you to go, stay. Choose to stay. I haven't even been given the choice to leave, she pointed out, but there was no heat in it. Then I'm offering it now. Not immediately, not until the danger passes, but eventually when things are stable, I'll give you the choice. Stay here with me or return to your world, and whatever you choose, I'll honor it. His hands tightened on hers. But I'm hoping you'll stay. Natalie's heart hammered against her ribs. This was crazy. This was a vampire who'd kidnapped her, who'd killed people, who lived in a world of violence and blood. But he was also kind to her, honest with her, sharing treasures of knowledge and treating her like an equal, despite the vast gulf between their natures. And when he looked at her like he was now, she felt something she hadn't let herself acknowledge until this moment. She was falling for him. Against all logic and self-preservation, she was falling for the Vampire King. Ask me again, she breathed. After the council. When I'm not just trying to survive but actually choosing. Ask me then. I will. He leaned forward, pressing his forehead against hers in a gesture of intimacy that stole her breath. I promise you, Natalie Jordan, you will have your choice, and I will spend every day until then giving you reasons to stay. The 3 nights before the council meeting were tense. Theron spent most of his time in strategy sessions with his advisors, preparing arguments and anticipating challenges. But he made time for Natalie every evening, sitting with her in the library or walking the gardens, never mentioning the looming threat but making his presence a comfort. Tell me about your life before, he asked one night. Your mother, your studies, your dreams. I want to know who you were when you walked through that door. So she told him. About her mother's illness and medical bills that had buried them in debt. About discovering art history in a community college course and falling in love with the way images told stories across centuries. About dreams of working in a museum, helping people connect with beauty and history. Small dreams, human dreams, but precious to her. You would have been brilliant at it, Theron said with certainty. You have that rare combination of passion and intellect. You don't just see art, you understand it. Past tense, she noted sadly. That life is gone. Maybe not. If you wanted, I could arrange a position for you. Private collections that need cataloging, restoration work that requires discretion. You could still pursue your passion, just in a different context. A context that involves vampires. Yes, he admitted. But would that be so terrible, if you chose it freely? She didn't answer, but the question lingered in her mind as the council night approached. When the evening finally arrived, Victor came to her suite with formal clothing, a dress that was elegant but not revealing, in deep midnight blue. His Majesty thought you should be present for the proceedings. He wants the court to see you, to understand what they're demanding be destroyed. Natalie's hands shook as she dressed, as Victor did her hair in a simple style that was nevertheless more elegant than anything she'd managed herself. She looked in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back, poised, dressed like royalty, but with fear bright in her eyes. The council was being held in a great hall she hadn't seen before, deep in the manor's heart. When Victor escorted her inside, she understood why. The room was enormous, lit by hundreds of candles that cast dancing shadows on stone walls. Vampires filled the space, dozens of them, all with that distinctive white hair and pale skin, all radiating power that made her skin prickle. At the far end, on a raised dais, sat Theron on a throne that looked carved from obsidian. He wore formal attire that was part modern suit, part medieval regalia with a silver circlet resting on his white hair. He looked every inch the ancient king, powerful and remote, until his eyes found her across the room, and something softened in his expression. Victor led her to a seat near the dais, close enough to hear everything. The vampires tracked her movement, their gazes heavy with judgment and curiosity. She forced herself to keep her chin up, to not show the terror coursing through her veins. Let us begin, Theron's voice rang out, commanding absolute attention. The Western clans have called this council to address concerns about my handling of a human who witnessed vampire activities. I acknowledge their right to question, and I will answer. But make no mistake, I am still your king, and my word is law in the Eastern Territories. A vampire rose from the gathered crowd, his bearing suggesting authority. Your Majesty, we mean no disrespect, but the law is clear. No human may know of our existence and live. You yourself established this law 3 centuries ago. I did, Theron agreed. And for 3 centuries it has served us well. But laws are not immutable. They must evolve with circumstances. Another vampire, female this time. You mean your personal attachment to this human? We've heard the rumors, Your Majesty. You keep her in your home, treat her as a guest rather than a prisoner. Some say you've grown fond of her. Is that the circumstance requiring we abandon our most fundamental protection? Yes. The simple admission sent ripples through the crowd. Theron's gaze never left Natalie. I have grown fond of her. I find her intelligent, brave, adaptable. She has brought something into my existence I didn't realize I was missing, and I will not kill her to satisfy tradition." "Then you endanger us all!" A male vampire stepped forward, aggression clear in his posture. "If word spreads that we allow humans to live with knowledge of our kind, we invite chaos. Hunters, governments, anyone seeking to exploit our weaknesses. One human life is not worth the risk to thousands of vampire lives." "I agree," Theron said calmly, "which is why Natalie will not be spreading word of anything. She remains under my protection in my territory, where she can be monitored and kept safe. She poses no threat because she has no desire to expose us. Isn't that right, Natalie?" Every vampire eye turned to her. The weight of their attention was crushing, predatory. But Theron had asked her directly, trusted her to speak. She stood on shaking legs. "I don't want to die," she said, voice steadier than she felt. "And I don't want to expose your people. I understand the danger that would cause, not just to vampires but to humans who might get caught in any resulting conflict. If I'm allowed to live, I will keep your secret, not because I'm forced to, but because it's the right thing to do." "Pretty words," the aggressive vampire sneered. "But humans are weak, they break under pressure, they gossip, they betray. How can we trust that this one won't do the same?" "Because I vouch for Fran stood, power radiating from him in waves that made even the boldest vampires step back. "My word is king. She will not betray us, and if by some chance she does, I will handle the consequences personally, but I will not execute her for the crime of existing." "This is madness," someone else shouted. "You're compromising everything for one human." "No." Theron's voice was deadly quiet. "I'm recognizing that perhaps our laws have become too rigid. How many times have we turned away potential allies because we couldn't trust humans? How many opportunities for progress have we lost because we default to killing anyone who stumbles into our world? Maybe it's time we evolved beyond blind adherence to ancient rules." The hall erupted in argument, vampires shouting over each other. Natalie watched it all with her heart in her throat, watched Theron stand alone against his own court, defending her. The realization of what this cost him, what he was risking, hit her with stunning force. He could lose his throne over this, over her. "Enough," Seraphine's voice cut through the chaos. She stood beside Theron's throne, her expression grave. "There is precedent for what His Majesty suggests. In the Prague Accords of 1742, the European courts agreed that humans could be kept alive under specific circumstances if they were bound by magical compulsion, if they served a strategic purpose, or if they were being considered for turning. Perhaps we could establish similar parameters here. Binding?" Natalie couldn't help interjecting. "You mean controlling my mind?" "No." Theron's response was immediate. "I won't enslave you that way. If the court needs assurance, I'll offer something else." He looked directly at the gathered vampires. "I claim Natalie Jordan as my chosen companion, under ancient law that grants her full protection of my house and status equal to a vampire noble. It also means any threat to her is a threat to me directly." Shocked silence descended. Victor, standing beside Natalie, inhaled sharply. Even Seraphine looked stunned. "Your Majesty," she said carefully, "chosen companion is a binding rarely invoked. It means I know what it means." Theron's gaze remained on Natalie, something intense and unreadable in his expression. "It means I'm pledging myself to her protection for as long as she lives. It means she becomes part of my household in the most formal sense. And it means anyone who harms her challenges me directly. Are there any here who wish to make that challenge?" No one spoke. The silence stretched, heavy with implications Natalie didn't fully understand but could feel the weight of. Finally, the vampire who'd first questioned Theron bowed his head. "If your Majesty invokes such an ancient right, who are we to dispute it? The human lives under your sworn protection. We will honor that." Others murmured agreement, some reluctant, others curious. The immediate threat dissolved like mist, leaving Natalie weak-kneed with relief. Theron had done it. He'd faced down his entire court and won. The council concluded with formal pronouncements she barely heard, her mind spinning. When the vampires finally dispersed, Theron descended from the dais and came directly to her. "Are you all right?" His hands found her shoulders, steadying her. "What did you just do?" She searched his face. "What is chosen companion?" "A conversation we should have privately." He glanced at Victor. "Take her back to her suite. I'll join her shortly after I finish here." Natalie wanted to protest, to demand answers immediately, but Victor was already guiding her away. The walk back through the manor felt endless, her mind racing with possibilities and implications. What had Theron bound himself to? What did this mean for both of them? When he finally appeared in her suite an hour later, she was pacing furiously. "Explain, now." He closed the door, leaning against it with an expression of exhaustion she'd never seen on him before. "Chosen companion is an ancient bond. It's what vampires invoke when they find someone human or vampire they wish to bind their fate to. Traditionally, it's been used for political alliances or deep friendships, but the most common use historically has been for, he paused, for romantic bonds. For vampires declaring their intention to court someone seriously. Natalie's heart stopped. You told your entire court you intend to court me? I told them you're under my absolute protection in a way that cannot be revoked without one of us dying. The romantic implication was left unspoken. But yes, most of them will assume that's my intention. He pushed off the door, moving closer. I had to do something they couldn't argue with. This was the only option that guaranteed your safety, without asking me. Anger and something else, something that felt dangerously like hope warred in her chest. You just decided we're bound together? I decided to keep you alive. His voice roughened. Everything else, that's still your choice, Natalie. The bond protects you. It gives you status. But it doesn't require you to feel anything you don't or to commit to anything you're not ready for. I would never force that on you. But you want it. She could see it in his eyes, hear it in his voice. You want the romantic bond, not just the political protection. Yes, he said it simply, honestly. I want you to stay, not as my captive or my protected guest, but as my partner. I want to court you properly to show you my world and hope you choose to be part of it. He stopped, something vulnerable crossing his face. I want to not be alone anymore, and I want it to be with you. Natalie's breath caught. This ancient, powerful vampire king was standing in front of her, practically begging her to give them a chance. It was insane. She'd known him less than 2 months. He'd kidnapped her. He was a vampire, for God's sake, immortal and dangerous and operating by rules so far from human morality. But he'd also shown her wonders, protected her, given her honesty and patience and friendship. And when she looked at him, she didn't see a monster anymore. She saw someone lonely and burdened and trying so hard to do the right thing despite centuries of conditioning toward cruelty. I'm still human, she said softly. I'll age, I'll die. You'll continue on for centuries after I'm dust, I know. Pain flickered across his face. Believe me, I know, and I've been trying to convince myself that's reason enough not to pursue this. But I can't help how I feel, Natalie. In 1,000 years, you're the first person who's made me want to risk that pain. What if I wanted to be like you? The question surprised them both. Could you turn me, make me vampire so we'd have more than just a human lifetime? Theron went very still. That's not a decision to make lightly. Becoming vampire means giving up sunlight, accepting a need for blood, living with the weight of immortality. Some people transition well. Others struggle with the loss of their humanity for centuries. I wouldn't wish it on anyone who wasn't absolutely certain. But it's possible? Yes, if you wanted it, if you were sure I could turn you. But not now. Not while everything is complicated by your captivity and the council politics. If you choose that path, it needs to be completely free choice, made with full understanding of what you're accepting. He cupped her face gently. I don't want you to become vampire just to make me happy, Natalie. I want you to choose what's right for you. She leaned into his touch, closing her eyes. This is all happening so fast. 2 months ago, I didn't know vampires existed. Now I'm being courted by their king and considering immortality. We can go slowly, he murmured. We have time. The council is satisfied for now. You're safe. We can let things develop naturally. See where this goes without pressure. I'm not going anywhere. Promise? She opened her eyes to meet his gaze. Promise. He leaned his forehead against hers in that gesture she was coming to love. You're mine to protect now, in the most formal sense. That's not a burden I take lightly or one I'll abandon. I'm not yours, she corrected, but softly. I'm me, but maybe I could choose to be with you. If you keep being honest with me. If you keep treating me as an equal despite the power difference. If you let this be real and not just some rescue fantasy, I can do that. His thumbs stroked her cheekbones. I want nothing more than for this to be real. Then he kissed her, soft and careful, giving her every opportunity to pull away. She didn't. She leaned into him instead, her hands finding his shoulders, kissing him back with a desperation that came from weeks of tension and fear and growing feelings she'd tried to deny. He was cool against her, but not cold, different but not wrong, and when he pulled back, they were both breathing hard. I want to court you properly, he said, voice rough. Show you everything my world has to offer. Let you choose me without pressure or fear, just genuine feeling. Will you let me try? Yes, Natalie whispered. Yes, let's try. The following weeks were strange and wonderful. Theron courted her with a courtliness from another era, bringing her flowers that bloomed at midnight, sharing passages from ancient love poetry, teaching her to dance to music that predated modern recording. But he also courted her with modern sensibilities, movie nights, in a private theater watching films he'd never experienced, discussions about current events where she taught him things about the modern world, Quiet evenings just talking about anything and everything. He was careful never to push physically beyond what she initiated, respecting boundaries she sometimes forgot to maintain in the haze of growing feelings, and he continued to be unfailingly honest, even when the truth was uncomfortable. "Some of my people still disapprove," he told her one evening as they walked the moonlit gardens. "They think I'm being foolish, risking stability for sentiment. Seraphine has suggested I might face challenges to my authority if I'm not careful." Challenges meaning what? Duels, potentially. Ancient vampire law allows for leadership challenges through combat. If someone believes I'm unfit to rule, they can formally challenge me. He said it casually, but she could feel the tension in him. Would you win? Almost certainly. I'm old and powerful and trained in warfare for most of my human life and all my vampire one, but the challenge itself would be destabilizing. It would signal weakness to other territories. He glanced at her. "I'm telling you this not to frighten you, but because you deserve to know what your presence here means politically." "It's a risk," she said slowly. "Me being here threatens your position. You're worth it." He stated it simply, like fact. "I've spent centuries building power and maintaining control. If I lose some of that for the sake of genuine connection, genuine feeling, that's a trade I'll make gladly." "You're insane," she said, but with affection. "Absolutely insane, perhaps, but it's the best kind of insanity." 3 months after that first terrible night, Natalie woke to find Theron sitting in a chair beside her bed watching her sleep. It should have been creepy. Instead, it felt protective. "Morning," she mumbled, still half asleep. "Nearly afternoon," he corrected with a slight smile. "You sleep late these days." "Because someone keeps me up until dawn with philosophical debates." She stretched, feeling content in a way she'd never expected to find here. "What are you doing here?" "I have something to show you." "Get dressed, something comfortable for walking." Curious, she did as he asked. He led her through the manor and out into the grounds, but instead of heading toward the familiar gardens, he took a path into the woods surrounding the estate. They walked for nearly 20 minutes in comfortable silence before emerging into a clearing she'd never seen before. In the center sat a small cottage, stone and wood, with smoke rising from a chimney. It looked like something from a fairy tale, charming and secluded. "What is this?" Natalie breathed. "Yours, if you want it." Theron gestured toward the building. "I had it prepared as a gift. You mentioned once that you felt sometimes overwhelmed by the manor, by always being surrounded by vampires. This would be your private space. There's a library, art studio, bedroom, kitchen, everything you need. It's still on my grounds, still protected, but it would give you independence. A place that's entirely your own." She stared at him, overwhelmed. "You built me a house?" "I renovated one that was already here," he corrected. "An old gamekeeper's cottage. But yes, essentially, I wanted you to have somewhere that felt like home, not a gilded cage." His expression was anxious, uncertain in a way she rarely saw. "Is it too much?" "I know I tend to go overboard, but I thought." She kissed him, cutting off the nervous explanation. Kissed him with all the gratitude and affection and growing love she'd been too afraid to name. When she pulled back, he looked dazed. "It's perfect," she said. "Thank you. For this, for everything. For trying so hard to make this situation bearable. I want it to be more than bearable." His arms came around her, holding her close. "I want you happy, Natalie. Genuinely happy." "I'm getting there," she admitted, which is bizarre considering how this started. "But you're wearing me down with all your ancient vampire charm. Is it working?" "It's working." She pulled back to look at him seriously. "Theron, I need to tell you something. I've been thinking about the future, about what I want, and I think I want to stay, not just until the danger passes, permanently, and not as human." His whole body went tense. "What are you saying?" "I want you to turn me eventually when we're both ready. I want the time with you, the centuries we could have together. I want to learn your world from the inside, to stand beside you as equal rather than protected human. I want." She took a breath. "I want forever with you, if you'll have me. If I'll have you." His voice broke. "Natalie, I would give you anything, everything, but are you sure? This isn't a decision you can take back, I'm sure." And she was. Over these months she'd seen what vampire existence meant. The beauty and the darkness, the power and the responsibility. And she wanted it. Wanted to stand beside this ancient king and help him navigate centuries ahead. "I don't want to do it immediately. Give me time to be sure, to finish processing everything. But eventually, yes. Turn me. Make me vampire so we can build a life together that isn't defined by my mortality." Theron kissed her then, deep and desperate, and she felt wetness on his cheeks. He was crying, she realized. The 1,000-year-old vampire king was crying with relief and joy. "I love you," he said against her lips. "I should have told you sooner, but I love you, Natalie Jordan. More than I thought myself capable of after all these centuries. I love you too." The words came easily, truthfully. Which is insane but somehow real anyway. I love you, Theron Harrowick. They stood in the clearing holding each other as the sun filtered through heavy tree cover, dappled the ground around them. It wasn't the life Natalie had planned, wasn't anything she could have imagined 6 months ago. But it was hers, chosen freely, and it was beautiful. The next year passed in a blur of discovery and growth. Natalie moved into her cottage but spent most nights at the manor with Theron. They continued her education in vampire politics and history, and he encouraged her to pursue her passion for art, helping her catalog his enormous collection, and even arranging for her to acquire pieces of her own. She grew close with some of the vampires in his court. Victor became a genuine friend, and even Seraphine warmed to her eventually, admitting that Natalie's presence had actually stabilized Theron in ways the advisor hadn't expected. He's happier, Seraphine said one evening when they were working together on court documents. More balanced, less likely to make rash decisions out of loneliness or boredom. You're good for him, even if I was skeptical initially. Thank you, Natalie said, genuinely moved. That means a lot coming from you. Don't let it go to your head, human. But Seraphine was smiling. Though I suppose I should stop calling you that, given what's coming, because they'd set a date. 1 year after Natalie's declaration, on the anniversary of that night in the clearing, Theron would turn her. The decision had been thoroughly discussed, examined from every angle, until they were both completely certain. I'm ready, Natalie said for the 100th time as the date approached. I promise I'm ready. I know. Theron pulled her close as they lay together in his massive bed. But I'm terrified of hurting you. The turning process is painful and there's always risk. You'll be with me through it. Every moment. He pressed a kiss to her forehead. And when you wake as vampire, we'll have eternity to explore together. The night arrived finally. Natalie had said goodbye to her mother through carefully crafted messages, establishing a cover story about working abroad that would allow for her eventual disappearance from her old life. It hurt, knowing she'd never see her mother again as human, but Theron had promised she could visit eventually, once she had control as a vampire. Are you ready? He asked, and she could hear the fear beneath his calm. I'm ready, she took his hand. Show me forever, Theron. The process was every bit as painful as he'd warned. His bite, the venom flowing into her veins, the sensation of her body dying and reforming. She screamed at points, and only his presence, his voice talking her through it, kept her from losing her mind to the agony. 3 days it took, 3 days of transformation. When she woke, everything had changed. Colors were sharper, sounds clearer. She could hear heartbeats of animals in the forest, smell the complex layers of scent that made up the world, and the hunger not overwhelming yet but present, a deep need she'd have to learn to control. Theron was there immediately, gathering her into his arms. Welcome back, did it work? Her voice sounded different to her own ears. Am I? You're vampire. He held up a mirror and she saw herself transformed. Still her, but sharper, more defined. And her hair white now. White as snow, white as Theron's, her skin pale as moonlight. I'm beautiful, she breathed. You always were. Now you just match the rest of us. He was grinning, relief and joy bright on his face. How do you feel? Hungry, she admitted. And strange, like everything is more but also different. Is this normal? Completely normal. We'll start your feeding training immediately. Victor has volunteers prepared. He cupped her face tenderly. You did it, Natalie. You survived. Now we have forever. Forever, she repeated, testing the word, then smiled. I like the sound of that. Learning to be vampire was harder than she expected, but also exhilarating. Theron taught her to feed without killing, to control her strength, to move with the enhanced speed and grace of their kind. She made mistakes, shattered furniture, accidentally frightened servants, struggled with the bloodlust that came with newness. But she also reveled in her new abilities. The power, the immortality, the sense of finally being Theron's equal rather than something fragile he had to protect. They stood together now, partners in truth. 6 months after her turning, Theron called another council. When the vampires gathered, he stood with Natalie beside him on the dais, presenting her formally to the court. Many of you remember the human girl I chose to protect, he began. Some of you questioned my judgment, feared I'd grown weak. I want to introduce you to Natalie Harrowick, my chosen companion, my partner, and as of now, Princess of the Eastern Territories. The title took her by surprise. He hadn't warned her about that. But she stood tall, meeting the gazes of vampires who'd once wanted her dead, and smiled with all the confidence her new nature provided. I know I'm not what you expected, she said, her voice carrying through the hall with vampire projection. But I'm not going anywhere. I stand with Theron, and I'll work with all of you to maintain the strength and stability of our territories. I may be young as vampires go, but I learn quickly, and I'm committed to our people's future. There was a moment of silence, then Victor began to applaud. Others joined in, and soon the entire hall was acknowledging her, accepting her place beside their king. Afterward, alone in their chambers, Theron pulled her into his arms. "Princess?" she questioned with a raised eyebrow. "You're my partner in all things. You should have the title that reflects that." He kissed her softly. "Besides, it makes it clear to everyone that you're not just protected, you're powerful in your own right." "I'm still new to this," she admitted. "Sometimes I miss being human, miss the simplicity of it. That's normal, the adjustment takes time." He held her closer. "Any regrets?" She thought about it seriously, then shook her head. "No, not when I have this, have you? Have forever to learn and grow and build something meaningful. This isn't the life I planned, but it's better than anything I could have imagined. Even though it started with kidnapping, even though," she laughed. "Though maybe don't lead with that when we tell our origin story to people," noted. His expression grew serious. "I spent so many centuries believing I'd walk eternity alone. That love was either impossible or too painful to pursue. Thank you for proving me wrong. Thank you for not killing me that night. Best decision I ever made." He kissed her again, deeper this time, full of promise. "Now, my princess, we have forever ahead of us. What do you want to do first?" Natalie looked around at their beautiful rooms, thought about the world waiting outside, a world she could now explore without limits, with this ancient, loving vampire at her side. The possibilities were endless. Everything, she decided. "I want to do everything. Travel, learn, maybe even start helping other vampires and humans find common ground. I have ideas about how we could." He cut her off with a kiss, laughing. "We have time for all of it. Centuries of time. But tonight, let's just be together. Just us, celebrating what we've built." "Just us," she agreed, sinking into his embrace. "I like the sound of that." And as they lay together, immortal and in love, Natalie thought back to that terrified girl who'd stumbled into the wrong room at the wrong time. She'd lost her human life that night, but gained something infinitely more precious. She'd found purpose, partnership, and a love that would literally last forever. The Vampire King had decided she could never leave him, and in the end she'd decided she never wanted to. It was the kind of ending, or rather, beginning that fairy tales rarely got right. Not perfect, but real. Not without struggle, but absolutely worth it. For Orver stretched ahead of them, full of possibility and promise, and together they would face every moment of it. Two souls who'd found each other against all odds and chosen to build eternity together. The story of the poor cleaner and the Vampire King became legend in their territories. A reminder that sometimes the most impossible beginnings lead to the most extraordinary love stories. And Natalie and Theron lived that story every day, making it more beautiful with each passing century. This was not the life she'd planned, but it was the life she chose. And that made all the difference.